day. I'm happy to be here with you today to talk about a very important element of success, a strategic plan. We know from experience and from research that if an organization has a complete and thorough strategic plan, their likelihood of success is much greater. I'm Deborah Lane, Program Specialist on the Network Technical Assistance Team at Rural Health Innovations. As a Program Specialist, I provide education, coaching, and technical assistance to rural health networks across the U.S. on topics like strategic planning, business planning, sustainability planning. I enjoy working with collaboration and community engagement, love working on building partnerships, and I know it's very important to build leadership. I come to the center with over 30 years of adult education experience and experience in designing, developing, and implementing and coordinating education programs across Minnesota, much of it working cooperatively with rural healthcare providers. We at RHI are looking forward to working with you during the coming months to complete your first deliverable, a strategic plan, and it is due December 31st, 2017. You are all aware that Rural Health Innovations is the technical assistance provider for your grant program. RHI is a subsidiary of the National Rural Health Resource Center. We are very glad to be providing you with assistance and tools to make an impact on your individual communities. From the invitation, you're very familiar with our objectives. Become familiar with the major components of a strategic plan. Learn about approaches for facilitating a group through strategic planning process. And become prepared to document your strategic planning work using the provided template. How are we going to accomplish this with our time together today? Is by reviewing highlights from Strategic Planning Part 1, behind the scenes with strategic planning. Then we'll spend some time at the process one goes through to gather the data to complete your strategic plan. And then we're going to quickly walk through the strategic plan toolkit for rural network development grant projects. There were some questions answered in Part 1, the why behind strategic planning. I think it's good to refresh all of our memories, and for those of you who were not able to attend the webinar, this will give you a bit of background. The link to the recording for that webinar is embedded in the previous slide, so please feel free to go to that and link and listen to that webinar for review or for the first time. The questions that we will quickly explore here are, what are the benefits of writing a strategic plan? Who should be involved? What are the benefits of having a shared vision? What is the strategic planning cycle? Why is it important to engage in the complete cycle? And finally, which planning framework? The traditional or balanced scorecard framework or a logic model? Which one's most appropriate for your network? What are the benefits of writing a strategic plan? A strategic plan is the end result of an intentional planning effort. Peter Drucker, a management thinker from the 50s and 60s, said, "The best way to predict your future is to create it." The goal of a strategic planning is to articulate the paths that will create that future. Strategic planning provides a focus for an organization and a process to determine the key areas to work on that will move your organization toward its vision and fulfill its purpose. Who should be involved? The National Rural Health Resource Center and Rural Health Innovations have developed resources describing the importance of collaboration in transforming healthcare. During this time of rapid change within the healthcare landscape and the movement toward population health, rural health networks have a unique and critical opportunity to bring stakeholders together from both the healthcare-based organizations and community-based organizations. We like to use this illustration, and perhaps you've seen it before, but we can all struggle to go through our mazes and do it all on our own to get to the same end. Or we can meet together and figure out how we can help each other get there. A list of stakeholders invited to participate in your strategic planning process will vary depending on your network's unique characteristics. Consider carefully the stakeholders that can bring information and understanding of the environment that can really help you strategically consider changes to move from your current reality toward your vision. Consider including stakeholder organizations such as hospitals, clinics, long-term care, home care, dental care, behavioral and mental health, schools, tribes, community social services, public health, faith communities, economic development, and the list goes on. What are the benefits of a shared vision? When developing an effective strategic plan, commitment to a shared vision is the critical first step. A vision identifies the achievements of the network's aspirations and therefore acts as a beacon for the organization. Peter Michael Senge of the MIT Sloan School of Management and author of the organizational development book, The Fifth Discipline, views organizations as dynamic systems in a state of continuous adaptation and improvement. This thinking identifies that having a shared vision pulls an organization toward that vision. Where when you're pulled toward that vision, there's ongoing things that are happening guided by strategic objectives. Constantly adjust the work to realize the achievements of that vision. What is the strategic planning cycle? A dynamic and iterative environment of planning, communicating, operationalizing, and adapting is a strategic planning cycle, and only effective when it has a destination to aim for, a beacon, that is that shared vision. Robert Kaplan and David Norton, business management writers and thinkers of the 80s, studied organizations to figure out why some succeeded and others didn't. They discovered that successful organizations had a holistic way of approaching their organizations. They devised a planning methodology called Balanced Scorecard. One of the key aspects of the Balanced Scorecard planning methodology describes the strategic planning cycle of analyze and plan, communicate, operationalize the plan, and monitor and adapt. CAP detailed this concept in great detail in Strategic Planning Part 1, Behind the Scenes with Strategic Planning. So please refer to that for more details. Why is it important to engage in the complete cycle? I like to think of this cycle in terms of a slinky. A slinky is circular, but if you follow one of the coils or circles around, you exit at a different point than you began. So is it with your network or your project. You start that cycle at one point, and as you go through the cycle, there are many changes that naturally occur by implementation. You mature and you change while doing your work. So you are not at the same place as you were when you began a year or less ago. Going around the cycle just keeps you moving forward. There are two basic planning frameworks commonly used in the planning process. One, the traditional strategic planning, or called the Balanced Scorecard approach, and then the logic model. Both approaches involve the same components and conversations, but the descriptive language and terms will vary. The framework selection is based on your preference. Whichever planning framework is selected, be consistent with the language throughout the planning and documentation process. This guide includes language based on the balanced scorecard framework. Now let's move into the plan component of your project strategic planning. As you review, there are 4 components. The first one, the network purpose and shared vision, and then the environmental scan and analysis, strategic objectives, and the 4th component is a communication plan. There are several of you that had a previous network development grant. In that last cycle, you developed a 5-year strategic plan. You had an option of focusing on either your project or your network if your network had lots of moving parts. We strongly urge you as a network to focus on your network development grant project. Where does the information or the data come from for these different components? The network purpose and shared vision, most of this is reporting of what is known. In a sense, just reporting on your known information. But the next components, the environmental scan and analysis, the strategic objectives, and communication plan are elements that need collaboration. Remember the mice visual? They are elements that can't be done in a vacuum or by an individual. Well, they can be, but it won't be successful. This is why we strongly encourage you to have a strategic planning event. We will spend time looking at the elements of such an event and how they work within the components of the strategic plan. One of the components or sections of your facilitation guide, or of your strategic planning guide, I should say, is the facilitation guide for strategic planning. And I believe that you're going to find this to be the most helpful section of the guide. There are facilitation designs for each of the components of the strategic plan, along with a couple of potential agendas for conducting your strategic planning event. Remember the mice, you're better together. These facilitations are designed to bring people together. So let's take a look at some of them. And if you would like to follow along in your guide, you will find that it starts on page 17. There are several ways to work with your network members to develop your plan. Again, remember, better together. This is an example of a day-long planning session. Also included is a series of planning sessions spread out over 5 sessions. You can adapt either of these agendas as needed to work for your network. For the purposes of our time together here today, we are going to use this one-day agenda. The first component of your plan is network purpose and shared vision. This section provides the strategic plan reader a really high-level overview of your network's history, members, and mission, and states the shared vision and primary grant goals. When I really think of it, I think of it like being up in the beams or on a catwalk, looking down from that top floor versus being on the floor, where you can really get the whole picture. And again, this sets the stage or the foundation for the rest of the plan, but also many of its elements set the stage for your strategic planning event. For your network, it helps all of the board and members that are there get on the same page. And as an outside reader of your strategic plan eventually, it really introduces me to your network. Most of the elements of this component are reporting of facts, but the shared vision needs to be understood and agreed upon by all participants in the strategic planning event. We've developed a PowerPoint that can help you get everyone on the same page. You can insert your network's information purpose, goals, network members, history, and the like. This PowerPoint will be available on our website where the recording of this webinar will be located. Within a few days of this webinar, you'll be receiving a link for that page. It is also important to get on the same page with everything from the agenda, expectations for the day, why to do strategic planning methodology, and common definitions. This PowerPoint I mentioned will help you do that. From experience, this is not an area that you want to cut out or shorten, because if everyone in the room is not standing on the same foundation, things will fall apart as you move forward. As a rule, development networks have been in existence for a while. Therefore, you have an established vision. If your network has not formally developed its vision, you will want to contact us for a vision development facilitation. This is the point where all participants in the strategic planning process go through what we call a vision check-in, with the purpose of developing a shared understanding of the beacon your network is aiming for. Assuming you already have your vision statement, this vision check-in is included in the guide. Remember, the vision is the foundational piece for your network to move forward. It's that beacon. So doing a vision check-in with all the strategic planning participants is key. Your network's current vision should be posted in the room. The first step is to have a participant read it aloud, followed by the conversation in this facilitation. This conversation is what we refer to as a focus conversation. This garners input from all participants and brings them to a deeper level of understanding. It will seek what is important about the vision to individuals and to organizations. This facilitation also includes a discussion about your grant goals. The conversation concludes with asking commitment toward the vision and alignment of the goals with your network's vision. You've grounded your work with the background information on your network and in regard to strategic planning and the vision check-in. All participants are in agreement. The next step is to understand what environment that you're working toward that vision in. An environmental scan and analysis is the section that reviews significant characteristics of the network's internal and external environment in terms of key blocks and strengths of your network. Remembering back to that strategic planning cycle, it is an important part of the analyze and plan phase. It is an intentional effort to look at levers. What are the things in your environment that propel or assist your network in reaching its vision and grant goals? Or blocks. What are the things in your environment that hinder your network or things that you need to work around in order to accomplish your vision and your goals? Your guide includes a list of things to consider when looking toward that environmental scan and analysis, sort of to prompt the persons in your room, kind of priming the pump, I guess, in a sense. These items include both internal and external things. And the last portion of the PowerPoint that I mentioned previously will help you put this information in a presentation for your participants. In the guide, we've included a list of elements that you may want to consider in an environmental scan presentation. There are things such as a list of your partner organizations, description of your collaboration history, results of needs assessments, summary of your financial environment and some of your network's primary revenue streams, financial forecasts the next 2 to 3 years, an inventory of resources owned by the network or shared by your partners, Always important to do the geographic setting of your network along with the demographics for the persons in your service area, and health indicators of your service area population. What are some new regulations or significant industry changes that affect your network and its work? Also, your grant project work plan, update it, and progress report on how you're coming as far as the grant work plan that you've designed. Depending upon how familiar with the environmental aspects your participants are, this determines the depth of this presentation before moving into the actual determination of things that block your network and things that help your network accomplish its goals. The facilitation guide will take you step by step through identifying those things that move your network forward, or its levers, and the things that block your network or its challenges. It is so important to have a shared understanding of the environment that you work in. By following this workshop, you'll be able to come to a consensus around these things affecting your work. There's an element of individual and small group work. The large group work will bring about a consensus amongst the participants. We start out by identifying and listing the blocks and levers, then sharing those in pairs or triads. And that group determines its top elements and shares those with the larger group. These ideas are recorded and prioritized to determine the top blocks and levers. This facilitation takes about 90 minutes. A guide to lots of really good thinking. Strategic objectives. This section identifies the 2 to 3 year strategic objectives that will move your network toward its vision. It is important to make it easy for both the internal and external reader to see the alignment of strategic objectives with the vision of your network. Use the data from the environmental scan to inform your objective development. They focus on achieving your grant goals along with your network's vision. We strongly encourage you to use SMART objectives: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. You've established the beacon or the vision. You all know what things that are hindering or blocking your work toward that vision and the things that are helping you achieve your vision. So now the next question is, what are you going to do to get to that vision, given the environment that you're working in? Once your network understands the environment, then you can determine how you will get to the vision given that environment. This cannot be done without going through those previous steps. This is a point where you can take two paths. One, start with a blank slate for the primary benefit of enlisting support from the new stakeholders at the table that were not part of developing the grant goals and strategies. This approach also is a way to check in and make sure that your goals and objectives in your grant application are still on target, given your changing environment. If you choose to start with a blank slate, it will take about 2 hours of good planning to develop strategic objectives that will guide your network into the future. This facilitation guide will help you do that. This, again, is a workshop setting where each of the participants do individual thinking around what are the key strategies that will guide this organization from today's reality to tomorrow's vision. After completing a list of at least 10 ways, participants are asked to star their 4 to 5 best ideas. Then, working in pairs, they share their top ideas and choose 5 to 6 ideas between them. These ideas are shared with the large group. Similar ideas are grouped. These groups are given names, which end up being the strategic directions. Following this facilitation will lead you to those directions. Again, this will take roughly 2 hours with a group of 10 to 15 participants. Remember, the real key with this approach is enlisting the support and buy-in of all stakeholders that you're working with. The other path is to start the planning process using the goals and objectives in your grant application and do a check-in on them to make sure that they are still applicable. It will take about an hour. If you choose this approach, it is important to do a check-in on the application goals and objectives with the stakeholders. This facilitation guide will help you do that. The first step in this approach is to present the application objectives. We have developed a handout for you to use, and this should be prepared ahead of time. This is a check-in to make sure that the application objectives address the discovered blocks and levers from earlier in the day. Following the instructions on the handout will guide you. Have the objectives filled out across the top row before the workshop. Participants will fill the top blocks and levers from the environmental scan discussion in the first column. Then individually put X's in the columns where the objectives address the specific block or lever. This is followed by a focused conversation, which will lead to the identification of those objectives from the grant and see if they may need to be changed. If you have a strategic plan in place, using this approach, a check-in discussion may work to check for accuracy of your objectives. Due to our rapidly changing environment, we suggest a strategic plan be updated at least every 3 years. The next step after establishing the objectives is to check back and make sure they are in alignment with your vision and purpose. It is imperative that you check to make sure your newly formed strategic objectives are in alignment with your vision. I know that there have been times I've been in a planning session and our group comes up with a great way to address a block identified in the environmental scan. There's a lot of energy behind it, but when we check it back against our vision, it doesn't help us achieve our goal or achieve that beacon. So it is important to check back against that vision. The 30-minute discussion here is designed to help you do that. Start by having someone read the vision that was confirmed in the vision check-in. It has been guiding you for your discussion toward those newly formed strategic directions. Then have someone else read the strategic objectives just established. Follow the focused conversation in this facilitation. By the end of the conversation, the total group should have a shared understanding of the objectives and full consensus to the objectives that achieve the vision. From experience, this again is not a step to cut short. It not only makes sure that the objectives are in alignment with your vision, but a very important piece is gaining commitment by all participants. The final section of your strategic plan is the communication plan. This section details how the strategic objectives and initiatives are communicated throughout the network and your partner organizations. This is an element throughout the entire strategic planning process. It is a plan for intentionally and purposefully communicating approved strategic objectives, the environmental analysis, progress toward your goals to your partners and stakeholders. We want to commit, or we want that commitment to our network's efforts. And communication is really the only way to do that. Communication is a key step for building commitment and accountability in achieving your strategic objectives. And a communication plan includes the what, the key information of the strategic planning cycle, such as its mission, vision, key strategies, key initiatives, and progress on key measures. The audience specifically to be addressed. Is it the staff, board members, member organizations and their staff, potential partners, funders, community members? It should include the how are you going to deliver the information. In person, at a network board meeting, email, website, phone, formal reports, discussion, retreats, social media, and the like. When will you provide this information? On an ad hoc basis, monthly, quarterly, in person, as requested? Who is responsible for the communication accuracy, timeliness, and frequency? Having all the participants be part of a conversation is very helpful to you as a network leader. They know how to best communicate with themselves. We have added an additional element to this conversation. What does success look like? This makes the objectives more real to the participants and gives you a jump start on your next deliverable, the evaluation plan. This 35-minute discussion will get the group to talk about what success looks like for each objective. The questions that lead up to what success looks like really gets everybody's head in the game. So don't bypass this discussion. The final part of the discussion is how to communicate within each of these objectives. There will be some common threads across the objectives, but also some unique elements for them. This information will be put into your communication plan. And again, this is something that's very helpful to you as a network leader. The final element is that of closing your time together. It's kind of like putting a bow on all of the work that you have done. We've included a brief closing for you to use. It puts closure to the day by the participants summarizing and talking about their next steps. It's important to bookend the days. You started with an opening and to finish with a closing. All of these facilitations and presentations are included in the toolkit. It contains 3 major pieces. Today we're going to show you and be talking about 2 of them, the Project Strategic Planning Guide and the Strategic Plan Template. Sample strategic plan elements from various development network grantees is also a part of it and is going to be posted on the website, as well as that PowerPoint that you can use for your planning event. We'll first take a look at the guide. The table of contents on the page 2 shows the basic sections of the guide. They are background and purpose, glossary, getting started, components, facilitation guide, and resources. The background and purpose talks a bit about our organization and why these materials were developed. Some words or elements that you'll find throughout the plan are defined in the glossary. This is all with the purpose of having a common definition as you move forward. The Getting Started section covers much of what we started our time with today, the basics about strategic planning. And please refer to this when you're preparing for doing your strategic planning session. We've already gone through each of the components in detail as we walk through the facilitation to garner information for each. In this section, you're going to find details about each of the components, how to best represent them, whether it's narrative, graphic, diagram, and additional resources that could be of help in development of those particular components. We just went over the elements of the facilitation guide for strategic planning. You'll find this to be one of the very helpful sections of the guide. This is where you look for facilitation designs that we talked about for each of the components of the strategic plan. There are a couple of potential agendas for conducting your strategic planning sessions. Remember the mice, you're better together. These facilitations designs are meant to help you do it together. We just looked at all of them in detail. We've included a list of resources that may be helpful as you work on your plan. Also, feel free to contact us at RHI with any other questions you have. We are here to be a resource for you. The second major element of the strategic plan toolkit is the template. As its name implies, it's a Word document that you can insert your network strategic plan into. This template is meant for guidance. You could format your plan in another way, but please use the template for guidance as to the number of pages for the different components. Also, please make sure all of the components in the template are in your finished plan. The template has three sections: the purpose and background, instructions, and strategic plan components. There will be background and instructions first. You will find in the instructions that you will delete these 2 pages for your final product. The instructions also include putting your network's name on the cover and in the header and footer. Once you are done with the entire document, you will need to update the table of contents. The 4 strategic plan components make up the rest of the template. In the instructions, you will see to delete the instructions for each component. These instructions include a 1-sentence definition, how to best do it, and where to look for the information. For this section, keep the network purpose and shared vision to no more than 2 pages. This component is typically narrative, although visuals can be used if you desire. Seeing page 10 of the strategic plan guide, and then also the strategic plan samples may help for details. A summary of the environmental scan can be narrative or could be chart or diagram. The description of the environment and the accompanying analysis should not be more than 2 pages. Seeing pages 11 and 12 of the project strategic plan guide and strategic plan samples will help with this. Here is one way of visually showing the environmental scan information. And this is another way that a network displayed their environmental scan information and analysis. The strategic objectives. This section identifies the 2 to 3 year strategic objectives that will move your network's project toward its vision. The information should fit into 1 page. Seeing pages 13 and 14 of your strategic plan guide, and then also seeing some samples such as this, is one way that networks showed in 1 page their directions toward achieving their vision. And another way of doing it is using the balanced scorecard strategy map to show your objectives. The final component of your strategic plan is the communication plan. This section details how the strategic objectives and initiatives are communicated throughout the network and to your partner organizations. Consider using a visual to illustrate your communication plan. This section should be no more than 2 pages and add rows as needed. Seeing page 15 of your strategic plan guide will help with this. Here's an example of the communication plan from one network. The final section of your plan is to talk about what's next. What is next in moving forward with the strategic planning cycle, and what the network's plans are to monitor and adjust. Remember the slinky, how you go around that circle. You start in one point, but you exit at a different point than where you began, constantly moving forward. Another important part of next steps is how are you going to update this plan? Recognizing in today's changing world, it is really only feasible to plan 2 to 3 years out. However, as an organization, you need to have a plan for updating and looking out 5 years. This is a plan for intentionally re-entering that strategic planning cycle at the analyze and plan phase. The time the plan is updated to make major adjustments for changing environment. If you are a grantee that had an award the last cycle, yes, you have a strategic plan, but the environment has changed and your project focus has changed. So it's time for a total refreshing of the plan. The next steps will be outlined in narrative format. Once you have inserted your network information into the plan template, you'll have a completed strategic plan. Remember, your network is not required to use this template, but we strongly suggest that whatever format you use include all of the components of this template. There are 3 others on our team besides myself, Becky, Cap, and Angie, that can provide support for your strategic planning efforts. So please feel free to contact or reach out to any of us.